Hi there, welcome. I'm going to be doing a stream today about the round 3 candidates game between Ding Loren and Fabiano Caruana. I'm going to be starting in just under 5 minutes' time, and we're going to be looking at the game, a few tactics, and some of the ideas, and a new opening idea because there was pretty much fire on the board from the very early stage, courtesy of Fabiano. And we're going to have a look at the game, and you can ask questions during if you're watching live. Or, of course, if you're watching afterwards, then pause the video and see what you do next at different points in the game. We're starting in just over 4 minutes' time now. You took in there now. Took in. That's it, you got it on there. It's okay. It's okay. You can't stay there all for this lesson. You can't stay there. Come on. Tuck in. Come on. Tuck in there. Tuck in. Tuck in. No. Don't you get like that now? You have to go on my lap, you. Come on. There we go. Good girl. Right, so welcome again to this stream where we'll be doing a quick analysis of the game between Fabiano Caruana, in which you can see he's playing the black pieces, and he was playing against Ding Loren. of China, who was playing for the white pieces. And at this point in the tournament, it was at round 3. So Ding Liren was actually right on the ropes in this game. At this time, he had 0 out of 2. He'd lost his first 2 games, so it was a pretty important match in the candidates tournament. And Fabiano Caruana was currently in the lead with 1.5 out of 2. So I believe that this had quite a big impact as to why Fabiano chose the way to play that he did. So we're going to have a look at the game. Obviously, if you've got any questions about the game, then please just ask in the chat room. Or, of course, you can pause the video maybe at home and maybe put, if you're watching it later, and maybe even send me some messages about any parts of the game you want to have a little look at again. And I'm sure I can do that on another day. So, right, let's get started with the game. So let me switch over to this one. So here we've got standard opening, pawn to d4. That Ding starts us off with, and Caruana plays d5. And it's not completely surprising that Caruana played the Slav. It's quite popular at a higher level at the moment, so no surprises so far. However, Ding brings his knights out. White brings a knight out here, and actually I guess maybe the only thing that you could say that would be quite popular at the moment is that people are playing quite a lot of exchange Slavs, where the c-pawns get traded. I tried this in one of my games recently, and it didn't work at all. I tried to get an advantage by playing it, and I messed it up. So it's not that easy to play, and quite drawish, which is why I think a lot of white players do it, because it's a drawn position really, but white's got slight chances to advance because it's quite equal. However, he didn't do that. He brought his both knights out. We went into the main line. Camera's gone out of focus. Let me just check that. That looks okay to me. So white's brought the knights out. This is still the main line, and then black here does pawn takes pawn c4. And the idea is that white's quite happy actually to give away this pawn here on c4. This is quite normal, and this is still the main line. White plays the move pawn to a4, and you can see that the computer's suggesting moves here as well, because we're still actually in theory. a4 was played to stop black playing pawn to b5. White plays, after bishop f5, white plays his knight into the centre of the board, and he's just going to recapture this pawn with the knight. And this has all been seen before. White's very happy with it, and so is black. Pawn to e6, obviously getting the pieces out, because white's going to capture this pawn, but white's going to have slightly delayed development because of this. So because he's moved the knight once, then twice, and then 3 times, which is obviously not ideal in the opening. It's not something that you want to do unless you're getting something for it. So what is white actually getting for it? Well, white is actually, because black has taken this pawn, black has removed a pawn that he's had in the centre, and he's taken one of white's pawns that was not quite in the centre. It was a little bit off-centre. It was a bishop's pawn. So it would have been controlling some central squares, but not the main ones. So white's actually got 2 pawns in the centre directly compared to black's 1. And what this means is that white's going to be able to start advancing his pawns forward in the centre to try and gain more space there. And whoever controls the centre generally wins the game, because they can attack in any direction. You can go to this side, you can go diagonal to the other side, or you can go straight on. So this is quite important for the way the dynamic of the game is going to change. So we play f3. And the idea is that white is going to play this pawn to e4 and kick this bishop away, and just gain loads of time in the centre. And if he can do, he will do bishop takes pawn c4 if he can. And you can see that the computer suggesting moves here of this pawn coming to c5 is a common idea. Black starts with bishop to b4 though, obviously getting his bishop out first. And then this is just pinning this knight, and this is absolutely critical at this stage that black plays this way, because here it would be a massive mistake for white to play e4. But I want to insert a couple of moves first. Let's just say that white captures this pawn back first, and then black castles, and black is nice and safe, and actually he's got 3 pieces out, 1, 2, 3, and he's castled as well. So black is ready for some activity, some active play, some let's try and attack white straight away. He's only got this last piece to develop, and actually it could go to a6 or it could go to d7. There's no issues there at all. And here, of course, white's already played the preparatory move f3, so surely white should be trying to play this move pawn to e4. Why can white not, or why does white not want to play pawn to e4 here? If you're watching and you want to type it in chat, then by all means have a go. I'll wait for about 30 seconds before going through a quick variation that could happen, because this would be a bit of a mistake by white if white was to go down this route. Why is this a mistake? It's a pretty interesting position, and this really plays on the idea that white's king is still in the centre of the board. Black's pieces are already inactive, and he's got a safe king, so black can start doing some crazy stuff to attack white. What do you think it would be that black can do? I'm sure some of you are still typing, but the idea here is that black can actually do knight takes pawn e4. And this initially looks a little bit silly because, well, you're going to lose the knight for a pawn. However, you've got this follow-up move, which is queen to h4 check. And this king is stuck in the centre, it's being attacked, and it has to move. The reason why it has to move is because if white blocks this check with g3, there's no other way to block the check or to capture the queen, then white is able to do the sneaky move queen takes pawn e4 check. Not only is it attacking the rook and the king at the same time, but this knight cannot take it because of this pin that we did earlier on in the game, and this would be absolutely horrendous for white if white did this. White can try and survive with something like king d2, but after just queen takes pawn, it looks like it's all falling apart for white. This king is going to be in a lot of danger very soon, and it's going to be pretty crazy for white to consider this as a serious alternative to what he could play. So this is why white does quite a different move here, which isn't as normal as we might think. White actually plays the move king to f2. And the reason is because of that variation just discussed. White still wants to play this pawn to e4, but when he plays queen to h4 check at the end of it, he's not going to have the check on the e4 square. He's also getting out of the pin on this diagonal as well, so the knight is supporting the pawn on e4. And this is a well-known move. This is not a surprise at this point. This is something that was to be expected. And here you'd probably expect Caruana to follow one of the main lines. I think knight bd7 is a possible move. You can also play the move pawn to c5, which is a pretty normal continuation. And just to give you a flavour as to what might happen, I know that things such as e4 could go on, and then it's I think it's a variation that looks a little bit like bishop takes knight, pawn takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes pawn check, king to g1, knight takes pawn, and then it goes something, or maybe not queen c2, but queen d2, and then I think pawn takes pawn. And this is very typical of this variation, where we can see that black's got 1, 2, 3 extra pawns here, or 4 extra pawns technically, and white's actually got an extra minor piece. And this is, pretty well known, and there's lots of variations that go on from here. So this is pretty standard for this variation. It is quite a sacrificial kind of move variation, where black is going to give away a piece for a few pawns to try and exploit white's king being out in the open. However, this is the point where Fabiano Caruana starts to give a massive surprise. He actually changes absolutely everything, and this would have put Ding in a massive pressure because he was already on 0 out of 2. He'd lost his first 2 games. He was a joint favourite, and Fabiano decides to surprise him, and he plays the move e5, which, I mean, it's absolutely crazy just to consider this move in the first place. Pawn to e5, where did he get this from? This must be some Fabiano preparation. I'm pretty sure that Ding would never have even considered this move before. And the reason is that you can take it two ways. And actually, you can even ignore it if you want to. If you don't want to take it, you could even play pawn to e4. And the idea is the same as the move as c5, is that you're just going to try and break open this white king position. And you're going to potentially sacrifice a piece just to try and either get checkmate or to try and win some more material somehow. And this would have meant, and at the time, Ding probably went into the tank here. You would have had to think for quite a long time about how to respond to this move. And it's not easy to deal with that over the board. If he was at home with his team, with a computer, then yeah, by all means. And I think I can't see Fabiano playing this variation again. This was a pure shock and awe factor. And he was trying to shock Ding into making a mistake. And remember, if Fabiano wins here as black, he goes to 2.5 out of 3, whereas Ding would have been on 0 out of 3. And Ding would pretty much be out of the tournament. He wouldn't be able to come back from that. That would be, unless a miracle happens, that would be far too much ground for him to make up. So Fabiano was really going for it here with the black pieces by playing this move pawn to e5. And it was an absolute shock to the commentators at the time when they saw it on the board. Let's see how Ding responded. So Ding did knight takes pawn e5. And here Fabiano uncorked a beautiful little move. That kind of more annoying than anything else, which I really like. I really like the fact that it's an annoying move. He played the move bishop to c2. And you might be thinking, what is going on here? This is crazy. So let's just take a moment to analyse what has actually happened. Black has just sacrificed a pawn. Okay, he's given up a pawn on e5, really for what looks like could be nothing, because white's pawn centre is pretty big. He's going to have the centre with these pawns, whatever he does. He's just moved his bishop to c2 where the queen can take it. Why can this queen not take that bishop on c2? If you think the answer, type it in the chat room or pause the video and have a look. Why is queen takes c2 a bad move? Why is black trying to sucker white into taking this bishop? What do you think the answer would be? I'll have a sip of my tea. And when you see the reason, or I'll show you in a few seconds' time, you'll see this is the reason why Ding didn't take the bishop, and Ding actually followed up with moving his queen away, which is just a little bit annoying. It's just displacing his pieces. So the move and the reason why is because after queen takes bishop, the queen is being dragged away from the d file, where it's actually protecting this pawn on d4. So the queen takes the pawn, it's check, and then also whichever way white blocks, blocking with the pawn or the bishop, doesn't matter which one, black's going to be able to take back the knight on e5, and then at that point, black would have won back the pawn that he sacrificed earlier on. He's won back the minor piece because he lost a bishop here, but he's going to be gaining a knight, and the material is going to be completely equal. But the main difference is that this white king is not going to be safe, and white's not going to have a big central pawn on d4 anymore. So this is why he can't take the bishop. So after bishop c2, Ding obviously is not going to fall for that, and he moved his queen to the d2 square. But we start to see what black's trying to do here. Black's trying to dislodge white's pieces, make it awkward for white to develop. You'll notice that this bishop here on f1 can't move at all. And with the queen just moving to d2, this bishop on c1 can't actually move either. So white's struggling to get his pieces out. He needs to get his pieces out to defend his pawns, defend his centre, and make sure his king actually doesn't get checkmated. And black is basically going to throw the kitchen sink at white here. So all of these pieces are in the attack already. The queen is already technically kind of in the attack already. It's already attacking a pawn here. Can't take it at the moment. Could be coming out to this diagonal as well. So we just need to start involving these last three pieces in the game. And if you can do that while breaking open white's centre and not allowing white to develop, then black should have a really good advantage and a good game. However, Ding is a formidable player and he really does show off his true defensive spirit here. It's black to move, and black says, well, I'm not going to let you rest. I'm not just going to develop my pieces slowly and then let you get your pieces out. Because remember, I think really all white needs to do, white can move this e-pawn and get this bishop out, then he's pretty much good. He only really needs 2 moves. And that's it. Black will have sacrificed a pawn for nothing, and black will be lost, so black has to act quickly. And this is called the initiative in chess, and it's something that I generally find that if somebody does a sacrifice and then plays slowly, it doesn't make any sense. You've got to act quickly. So he plays the move pawn to c5, and obviously straight away you've got a double attack on this d-pawn, the queen and the pawn together, forcing this pawn or white to do something about this pawn. You can't just leave it there. And remember, white is only actually up a 1 pawn here at this stage. So he pushes past to d5. He doesn't take it because it would mean that the bishop will come back to here and that would be a check. Again, dislodging the white pieces a little bit more, making it more awkward for white. So white pushes past. Obviously, this pawn's pretty strong here at the moment. It's not terribly good though, because at the moment it's potentially something could get taken. But black doesn't want to take this pawn just yet, because remember, this bishop that he moved here to c2 is still unguarded, and it would be taken for free, or just the loss of a pawn, so he's got to do something about it. So therefore he chooses to move the bishop back to b3. I'd just like to bring to your attention that there was another quite crazy move of bishop to e4, which just from first glances doesn't look normal at all, because the knight and the pawn are both attacking it. But I'm hoping that you'd be able to see that after pawn takes bishop, this would be a really bad idea, because then the knight could take the pawn, and this would be a beautiful little fork alongside a pin as well. So you'd be winning the queen whatever. So I assume that white would do something like knight takes knight, and then you'd be able to do bishop takes queen, and okay, you'd lose 2 pieces of the queen, but black would be very happy here, winning the queen. But Fabiano didn't want to play bishop to e4. He decided to play bishop to b3. And I believe that he was still in his preparation here along this point. It was looking pretty good for him. White decided to consolidate his centre, because this d-pawn here is under attack by 3 pieces. And technically he's only really got his queen defending it, because this knight is kind of pinned. So white just decides to put his extra pawn in the centre, plays his pawn to e4. And this is what white's kind of wanting at the moment. He's got his pawn centre going. This is a very strong pawn chain, each pawn protecting the next. And this is what he's hoping is going to win in the game. He's got control of the centre. If he can get his pieces out, get this bishop out, and get his rook out on h1, this rook across somewhere, then he's going to be very happy, could just be a pawn up, and he's just going to win the game quite nicely. Black's going to keep attacking though, brings an extra piece into the game by playing rook to e8, obviously attacking this knight on e5. And it's quite interesting here, because it's so easy for white to go wrong. For example, let's just say that white plays knight to d3. Looks like a normal move. The knight was under attack, so why not move it backwards? What move would you play here as black? So either pause the video and then have a think, or you can type it in the chat. What move would you do here as black? What's the idea again? And it's kind of something that we might have already discussed, which is quite interesting. So hello to Badger65 and Passport9999 again. Good to see you having a go at some of the problems in the chats. What would you play here as black if white retreated the knight? It's so easy to go wrong in this position if you're white, and I think Ding was in pretty much time trouble very quickly, if not here, then in a few moves' time, trying to figure out all the variations to see what the best way to defend is. You're going to tuck in. My dog's not quite settling down yet. So for those of you that have had a go, and did pause the video to have a look at see what black would play here. Black would probably play something like rook takes pawn, and this would be a bit crazy. and it does get very crazy because we have here pawn takes rook, and you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, you're giving away a rook for a pawn. Doesn't make any sense, but then we've still got that same tactic again, with the knight coming in, forking the king and queen, and then the bishop pinning this knight to the queen. However, it's not that simple. The knight would take the knight, you take the queen, and let's say it recaptures back, and then we'll have a quick look at the material here. You've got a rook, knight, and bishop. So rook, knight, and bishop. Those three would be equivalent to the rook, knight, and bishop here. And then for the queen, you'd have a rook, knight, and bishop of whites. So it's pretty level and pretty awkward for material. However, there's a key difference in that, well, one, black can take this pawn straight away, and two, this white king is out in the open. So if I was black here, I'd be pretty happy with this variation, and I'd definitely play on from here. I think black's pawns are going to be really good because black's going to win this one. He's going to have an extra pawn on both sides of the board, and black would be very happy here in this little position. So a nice use of a fork and a pin at the same time. But of course, Ding isn't going to fall for that one, and not going to fall for many of the tactics, but we use these tactics to help us gain an advantage. So he knows that he has to defend the knight, and he plays queen to f4, obviously protecting it. But of course, this is another queen move. He's not getting out his bishops just yet. And then here, Fabiano decides to go, well, if I don't do anything soon, and maybe he planned this, maybe he did plan it, but he decides to jettison another pawn. Because otherwise, if he allows white to just maybe move his bishop out to this square, get his rook across to, I don't know, e1, let's say, and then he can actually do something called self-castling by moving his king back. And then he's basically got all his pieces where he wants them, his king's safe, and he's got two pawns in the centre, and he's also one pawn up. So at that level, at the Super Grandmaster level, one pawn is enough to win, let alone being a pawn that's only 3 squares away from queening and protected by another pawn as well. So that would be suicide for Fabiano to go slow here. So he has to go quick, and he plays the move pawn to c4. And again, he's just trying to open up diagonals against this white king. And you see that obviously the queen and the dark squared bishop can come and check this king. And he's just trying to open up as many tactics as possible to make it as difficult for Ding to get himself back in the groove. So here, white takes the pawn, gratefully accepts the pawn extra, thinks this is brilliant. I've got 2 pawns now up. At some point, can he sacrifice material to alleviate the attack? And he does that later on. Black decides to get his last minor piece into the game by playing knight to d7, and white does a good developing move as well. And it's a case of here how to continue. What's black's ideas? Because he's opened up this diagonal for the king, but white's pretty much got that covered by this bishop here on e3. And actually, the only pieces that can go on the dark squares diagonally are the queen and the bishop, and they're both there ready to defend that diagonal. These bishops look pretty good here next to each other, ready to take off one of these 2 knights. This is just a case of, can they actually do anything where it wins something for black? Because otherwise, yet again, this bishop's going to come out, the rooks are going to connected, they're going to get across, and then white's just going to self-castle, and he's going to be fired. So maybe Fabiano had this in this prep and was hoping maybe Ding would have gone wrong sooner than this. I think he's still got an initiative as black here. However, he's starting to slightly lose it a little bit because he plays knight to f8. And there's the clear idea here that he's going to bring this knight out to the g6 square, which is what he does a couple of moves time after bishop d4. Obviously, the knight is attacking the queen. It's on a good square there. It's closer to this white king, and it's being a lot more aggressive. This white queen has got a few squares to go to, but notice just how easy it is to make a mistake if you were to play queen to e3 here, for example. You can tell me what kind of moves can you see that can be played here. We can possibly remove this knight and then maybe do knight takes pawn because there's a pin down the e-file. We could maybe even move this knight out of the way and play our pawn to f5 because, again, of the pin down the e-file. One thing that you really want to avoid is putting your pieces into pins. And here this pawn is pinned by the rook to the queen, something that I'd always be looking to avoid. So he decides to keep his queen forward, and this is the big thing when you're defending. Do you keep your pieces forward in the hope that they'll disrupt your enemy from attacking you, or do you bring them backwards and go into your shell? and it really does depend on the position. And I'm always a big advocate of trying to keep your pieces as far forward as possible, annoying the enemy, and even creating chances for yourself to win the game. But of course, in doing that, it always makes it a lot harder to play the game because it becomes more tactical and more crazy. But that's why he's gone Queen F5. Also gives himself a bit more space if he ever wants to move some pawns further forward as well. And here, Black decides to do a little bit of a trade. He can't really see a clear way through, so he's going to do a couple of exchanges here to try and get at this White King. And I don't think there's anything that White can do to stop this, but with exchanging pieces, this is something that Black doesn't naturally want to do because he's 2 pawns down. So if he exchanges off all the pieces, he's definitely lost an endgame. So he had to have something concrete here, and he saw that after bishop takes knight, White takes back with this bishop, and then he plays this move queen to c7, obviously attacking the bishop here on c4. The bishop retreats back to e2. Could it have gone back to d3? Possibly it could have done, but on d3 it's not guarded, whereas on e2 it's guarded by 2 pieces, one being the king, which isn't moving, the other one is the knight on c3, although that could be taken. And then Black finally decides to cash in on this diagonal that he opened for himself and played bishop to c5. And he's trying to swap off this bishop and trying to get some checks on this king, make it difficult for White to develop his remaining rooks and pieces. Because after takes, check, and king goes back to f1, we see that Black's idea here has been to trap this rook on h1 in, and so Black's effectively fighting this game at the moment with an extra rook. The problem is, though, is that White has got a plan of maybe moving this pawn forward, get his king to g2, and then swinging the rook out, and all of his problems will be solved if he's able to do that. And you'll see this happen in the next few moves. I think this is really where we reach the critical point of this game. And I remember it being said, and I think I've seen a few other analysis as well, and that, you know, if you sacrifice 2 pawns, you've got to be quick with what you do. And you can't just rest on your laurels. You can't go making defensive moves unless you absolutely have to. You've got to act quickly. And I believe here that Black should have played the move rook to e5. This looks like this was absolutely critical to kick this queen away from this square. Where can the queen go first of all? There's not that many squares for it. Can't go anywhere here. Can't go this way. Can't go this way. Can't go this way. Can't go directly backwards. The only safe square for it would be this h3 square, and so you'd be driving this queen away to the edge of the board, where it's not as influential as where it is at the moment. However, Fabiano, I think, took his he maybe mixed up his lines, some people said, or perhaps just maybe showed a bit of weakness, is the only thing, because he played the move h6, and I can't really see too much about what h6 accomplishes for Black in terms of attacking, because, I mean, the g5 square wasn't really too important to control at the moment. Okay, he's opened up, so he's not going to get back rank mated, but there's no threat of back rank mate at the moment. So I think here he starts to lose his thread of how he's going to attack Ding. And this is just a little bit of a problem now, because this is where Ding starts to come back into it, and he definitely starts to take the advantage, and we're going to see how he converts this advantage into a win. So he keeps on getting his pieces out. Rook to d1, Ding does well there. Queen to b6, attacking this pawn on b2. It's easily defended though, with rook to d2. But then he brings his queen back to e3. So you can see here that Black, Fabiano's kind of moving his queen around, and he's kind of more harassing White's pieces. So he's maybe hoping that this rook maybe goes back to d1, and then they'll have a repetition going back to b6 and such. But Ding's not going to do that, because he's 2 pawns up. He's playing on for the win here. And so he moves his rook across to c2. And then Black realises that he needs to get counterplay on the queen side, brings his pawn forward to a6, and after the queen goes back to h3 anyway, Black plays his pawn to b5, queen goes to g3, and this is an important manoeuvre now at this point, because he needs to kick this queen out of this e3 square so he can get his king out, and then finally get his rook out, and when he does that, he will be winning. And so here, this queen is coming to the dark squares, and the Black's going to have to be faced with a choice of either swapping the queen off or abandoning that diagonal, and White's going to be able to get his king out. So he plays b4, obviously attacking the knight and preventing the white queen moving back. So the knight goes back to d1, which white actually isn't too unhappy with doing because it's attacking the queen straight away. So the queen's going to have to move. Queen goes across to b3, attacking the rook at the same time, and the rook comes to d2 here. Now, Ding's actually not too unhappy with this. Hello, Sachin Saju. White's not unhappy about this because even though he might have just lost this pawn on a4, the issue is that the king is actually going to be able to get to this g2 square, or even f2 perhaps, to allow his last piece into the game, because you remember he was 2 pawns up, and actually these 2 pawns are huge pawns. This is absolutely huge in the game. He's got control of the centre. They're also pretty close to queening. So these pawns, if they start to go, you can easily see this pawn getting to this square with this pawn defending it and this pawn to here, and those pawns aren't worth 1 point each anymore. They're worth an awful lot more. So he's really not bothered about giving up this pawn on a4. Okay, you could argue that white's only technically 1 pawn up here, but positionally he's up so much more, and it becomes a lot easier for him at this point. Let's just go through these next few moves. So white brings his queen back because he needs to move his g-pawn. The queen goes to d7, g3 because he wants to put his king to g2, so he can get his rook out. And then the queen comes to h3 check, kind of as expected. And then he's got to do this kind of process again of kicking the queen away while in order to get his king to that g2 square. But the good thing is that his knights are already on d1, so when he brings the knight to f2, the queen's going to have to move, and then he can get his king out eventually. So after the queen moves, knight goes to the side, knight to f2, queen goes back, and then here at this point, white is very happy. White is absolutely over the moon because he can see straight away that this could happen. Okay, it's just something that you have to be aware of, though, is that there are some possible sacrifices coming this way. Because if white's able to get this move in and then get his rook across, then white's just going to be winning the game very easily. And so here he decides not to play king to g2 first of all. He just wants something else to happen. He's going to play his pawn to f4. And this kind of forces black's hand, because this bishop is attacking this knight here on this h5 square. Really nice manoeuvre. And it's basically saying, do you know what? Either defend your knight, which you can't do, move it backwards to f6, and if he's using his pawns to push his opponent backwards, then black's just going to be running around in circles because these pawns aren't stopping. They're just going to keep pushing black backwards again and again and again. Or do what you did in the game, which is sacrifice a piece, which is what Fabiano does. It's kind of his last chance. He's hoping for tactics here against white. He's hoping to get lucky. And I think it's really instructive, actually, how white wins the game from here. Obviously, he takes the piece here in this case, and then he plays king to f1, so he's still searching for a square for his king to go to, just so he can get this rook out. But of course, here, the g-file's been opened up, so this rook can actually contribute by just moving 1 square to the left. And that's why king to f1 was played. Queen comes to d6. Black's trying to form a blockade on these dark squares of these pawns, because white doesn't have a dark squared bishop. He's only got a light squared bishop. And white finally gets his last piece into the game with rook g1. Hooray! And Ding has come out of this fight at this moment, and he knows that he's better here. He knows that he's playing for the win, and he's just going to try and checkmate, obviously with a checkmate threat of queen takes g7 in the air. And he's going to just keep pushing his pawns forward and get his pieces in the ranks with his black king. So he plays f6 to stop the checkmates, and then he just takes time out to just stop these 2 pawns going further forward. Remember that white's up a piece here, and it's this extra bishop, because the knights will cancel each other out. So he plays the move bishop to b5. A really nice little move, actually, obviously attacking the rook at the same time, but then after rook to e7, he plays the move b3. And now we have this situation on the queen side where black's extra pawn actually isn't really an extra pawn at all, because this bishop and this pawn are combining to cover this a4 square, and neither of these pawns can move. And this is a really nice little blockade that white has done here, and this bishop is also helping these pawns potentially come forward too. And you're going to see white use these pawns in a way to give his pieces outposts further on up the board. Black brings his rook to f8, white goes rook to c2 on an open file, knight goes back to e6, obviously exploiting a pin here on the d pawn, but white's not going to take that. He brings his queen back to make the knight move again. Knight goes to g5, h4, again using the pawns to push the pieces back. Knight moves back to f7. It might be able to jump into e5, which is a beautiful square for it, I agree, but it's just a little bit too late, because as the rook comes to c6, the queen has to move because it's under attack. Notice how the rook was using the pawn as an outpost further on down the board, and then all of a sudden a few things start to drop here. And white's able to take a pawn on f6 because of this rook that is contributing to the game and pinning the pawn on g7. Black plays king to h8. We'll get to the end of the game very soon. Rook comes back, and it's just a matter of technique here, making sure that black doesn't have any counterplay, making sure that he's got every single file covered. Notice how every single file here is covered by a white piece. The only file that doesn't have a white piece on it is the A file, but black's blocking it with his own pawn. So this just means that these rooks have got no open files for them to attack down, and if he does try and attack down, he's going to have to swap off the rooks. Black does not want to swap off the rooks when he's a piece down at this stage. He plays rook c7, kind of trying to open the queen move so he can get his rook down on the c file, but no, you're not coming through. Bishop to c6, again using this pawn as an outpost for his bishop, and blocking this rook's open files. And then he uses the idea that the bishop is pinned to the queen to play a4, and this is kind of like a last-ditch attempt at this stage, just to try and get some counterplay for black. Can't take it with the bishop because he loses his queen, takes it with the pawn, he plays b3, the rook comes up, he plays b2, he plays rook b3, the rook's always going to be in time to catch the pawn, it's not a problem. Notice here how, even if he had done a queen to b8, queen to b8 here to defend the pawn. It's not really defending the pawn. Why is it not defending the pawn? Well, pause the video and have a look, or try and type your answer in chat. Why is queen to b8 not actually defending the pawn properly? Well, if you've had a look, hopefully you've found the answer, and everything has fallen apart from for black here, because white can just simply do rook takes pawn, because if the queen takes the rook back, you might think, oh no, I've lost the rook but only gained the pawn. The difference is that this queen was actually attacking this rook here on the f8 square, and you could take this with a check, king would move, and then you could actually take another piece if you wanted to, and the game would be over. Black's not got many checks on the white king here. So that would be a nice little finish if you got that, which is why you move the pawn forwards. The rook came behind, there's nothing that black can do to save the pawn, and so not only is white a bishop up here, but he's actually going to go up 2 pawns as well. You decide to swap off some pieces and take the pawn, and you might think that actually the king on f1 is potentially got a lot of checks coming this way. Actually, with the knight on f2, that's all it really needs to defend it. There's not actually that many checks that black can get on his king, more so because white's got too many threats against black. So for example, this knight's under attack on d6, and there could even be potential checks on the back rank if the queen was to leave the back rank. And so it's all about the threats that the white has on black rather than the other way around. And here I think Caruana just played on a little bit too long. He could easily resign here, but he was just trying to find his way back into the game. He checks, he moved his king around, and Ding just shows some nice technique just to finish this game off. Nice little discovered check here, going this way. Knight blocks on f5, then he tries to swap queens. So if he doesn't swap queens, which he didn't, he gave a check, the king went to g2, and there's no more checks, or no more decent checks, shall we say. Knight to e3 is not really that good. The king can just move to, well, he can go to f3 if he wants. In fact, actually, what's after the next e3 check? I can't do. It's pinned. There we go. So there are no decent checks. G6 to try and get that check in, but then he goes rook to b3, and this cuts out this check here by guarding that square. And here at this point, black finally resigns because white is just going to march these pawns forward, or even checkmate black. He's got lots of options there. Really nice game. by Ding against Caruana. Caruana obviously had his preparation, which he actually got. He got his preparation against Ding, but I think he just slacked off at the wrong moment. And the key position here, all the way back about midway through the game, let me just find it, was when he played the move h6 here. Here at this point, Black played the move h6, and it's just not attacking enough. He needed to keep the attack up. If you ever do a sacrifice, then unless you've got a long positional edge, which Black doesn't have here, because White's going to get his pieces out and just win, you need to be aggressive. And I think the key move was rook to e5, forcing the queen away and being more active that way. But yeah, a really nice game by Ding. This put him at that point, moved him up to 1 out of 3, kept his tournament hopes alive, and actually he really showed some Karpovian techniques, shall we say, to actually win this game. So yeah, really interesting game to go through. Okay, yeah, so that's the end of the stream. Obviously, if you've got any comments, by all means, just leave them on the chats or in the filter. I'll upload the video to YouTube as well for you to watch it. And I'll go through another game tomorrow at about 3 o'clock as well. Thank you very much for watching.